For more than a century, the Isle of Man TT has produced many heroes and legends, plus provided some of the greatest motorcycle races the sport has ever known. In 1992, the planets and the stars seemingly aligned to bring us arguably the best ever, which involved a man who was that good, they built statues of him. In 1991, Honda teammates Carl Fogarty and Steve Hislop had provided a week-long running duel which is remembered as one of the classic years in the history of the Isle of Man TT races. A year later, they were back, this time Fogarty on the OW01 Yamaha, while Hislop had the 588cc rotary Norton. During race week of '92, neither had managed a victory, with Fogarty looking to end his TT career on a high, while Hislop was aiming to give Norton its first senior TT victory since Mike Hailwood in 1961. The scene was set for what many say is the greatest TT race of all time.
The young Carl Fogarty was, I'm going to assume he knew he was quick, because he certainly thought he was quick and he certainly thought he should win. And he had the Mark I edition of the race face, you know, that look through the visor. We're talking a fast young man with a point to prove. I think that is the most civilised way to put it. Hizzy, one of the most naturally gifted racers, and I'm not alone in this opinion, it's one of the most naturally gifted racers this country has produced. I can't think of a more different racer.
The man in charge of the Honda racing team in the early 1990s was Neil Tuxworth.
That was '91, and Steve Hislop won both the races that year on the RVF. Carl Fogarty was second to him in the Formula One. It's like all things with riders, they change teams for various reasons. That was the point with Steve Hislop where he'd more or less decided to stop doing the TT. I know he did come back and he rode the Norton, but Steve was getting to the point where, as you well know, in the latter years of Steve's career and his life, he didn't do the Isle of Man TT. He stopped doing it after he'd had 11 wins, and he wanted to concentrate on short circuits. Carl Fogarty, on the other hand, he was going into the World Superbike Championship, so of course he had a different direction to go as well. So they both just went in different directions in their career, really, and that's why they moved. Yes, Carl rode the Yamaha, I appreciate that there, but he didn't have to do lots of other road races, which Honda would have required. So that's why they both moved on.
It was funny, yeah, because I hadn't planned to go back to TT in '92, I really hadn't. I've got this Ducati, I knew I was a top short circuit rider in the World Championships. I knew that from '91, and I had to go and kind of buy my own bike to run my own team to prove that, you know. But this thing was proving to cost a lot of money to run this bike. And the TT thing in '92 came about as a last minute thing, really. The funny thing was, I don't know if a lot of people remember this, but Steve Hislop was supposed to ride the bike I rode at the TT, the Loctite Yamaha. Steve rode for Yamaha at the beginning of '92. I don't know, he fell out with the Yamaha team, he couldn't get on with the Yamaha, whatever it was, I don't know now. But he rode for Yamaha in the first round of the British Championships, or the first few internationals, where it was, and he said, I'm not riding this bike, I don't like it. Because he did that, he couldn't ride for Yamaha at the TT. And the next thing, he turned up on a Kawasaki at Brands Hatch and did really well. I think he was second or third behind John Reynolds on the Kawasaki, so I really like the bike, it's great. Okay, no problems. I think I might be doing TT on a Norton. Oh, all right, good luck with that one. Yeah, it's fast, hell of a fast bike, you know.
I had said to him at some stage previously, if ever he wanted to have a crack on the Norton, we'd obviously love to have him.
No one saw it coming, because no one in their right mind thought the Norton could win a TT. We had a fast, very fast motorbike, but you know, and it could blast past standard 750s in a straight line, but for the TT, really? Really? No, it was a totally unrefined, blunt instrument of a motorcycle.
So the next thing is I get a phone call from Yamaha, would you be interested in doing TT? I thought, I don't know, would I, sort of thing, you know. Well, they made me an offer, and I thought if I go to the tourist board and get get the same kind of money off them. I think it was about £6,000 or £7,000, something like that. And the same off Yamaha, which was a lot of money back then, like 14 grand, which I needed the money to run the Ducati World Superbike campaign. So that's how it all came about, really. I ended up riding what should have been Steve's bike at the TT at the last minute, and he obviously did the Norton thing.
When Steve came along, really, that you couldn't have got second best. So we sat down and chatted, and I said to him, well, you raise what you can, and we'll do the rest from our end, and we'll see how we go. Obviously, Steve wanted at least to have a go on it. We went to Alton Park, and the test was a disaster, absolute disaster. And it was obvious that he was a little disappointed, I think, putting it mildly. We had been having serious problems still with fuelling. It drank petrol like a drunk, and we had to keep reducing the amount of fuel that was going into the engine to get the mileage from the 24 litres. And the engine was so fragile and generated so much heat that you know, a minuscule part of a turn one way or another on a jet and the engine's destroyed. So, and I said, we had a chat afterwards, and I said, look, I know you're not going to have been happy with this. We are going to continue, and we'll get it right. You know me, and you know Chris, and you know the other mechanics. We'll do everything we can to make sure that it's a proper job. And if you like, we'll go to Germany on the first day available. You can ride the thing, and if it's good, fair enough, we'll carry on. If it isn't, then I don't mind if you withdraw or pull off at the end of the grandstand.
Fogarty was riding the Loctite Yamaha, which Rob McElnay had been racing on short circuits that year.
I went to Derby, went up and down the straight line, which was fine. It was going to be in it, you know. Then I did the first practice laps on Monday. I couldn't. It was all over the place. Couldn't ride it. Its suspension's terrible. It's just out of control. You put a harder rear spring in, maybe the fork something. Well, it was just worse. I couldn't even. I felt like turning back at Quarter Bridge and coming back around it that bad. But I did a lap. We'd gone the wrong way a few times with the setting, and then I went out Friday morning on it, the last session before the first big race on Saturday. I went out on the bike, felt great, felt loads better. I did 120 mile an hour on the Friday morning, like 5 o'clock in the morning, whatever it was back in those days. Thought, I'm right, yeah, ready for the race, can win this, you know. So that was it, yeah. The first two-back race came, and straight away I got signals +1, +2, and you know I was leading the race by a country mile, to be fair. I think it was Philip McCallum I was dicey with. I was getting used to the bike all the time, but come to the mountain, I pulled 10 seconds every lap on Philip. So it was like, I think I was leading by 35 seconds on the 5th lap. So I was cruising, you know. And the gearbox went at the end of the 5th lap, the bungalow, it just broke. I was absolutely gutted, heartbroken, you know. And it would have stopped Honda winning 10 in a row. And Steve, I think, had a few issues with the cooling of the bike, I remember rightly, with the mudguard and stuff on some of the laps on the Norton. So yeah, and that was it. That was how that first race went. I was just gutted that I was robbed of victory when it was there, you know.
Hizzy and Foggy both obviously thought they should have won that race, and but I got it.
And then a checkered flag that will make Phil McCallum a winner on the Isle of Man.
Well, I remember the Norton being overheated in the first race. I remember Fogarty leading it by a mile. His gearbox broke. Then they ran this Norton out of mudguard, front mudguard, and made some scoops to try and keep it a bit cooler, like prehistoric scoops. I think they were you know, they were margarine tubs or something taped on the side.
Well, they were so unpredictable that you really couldn't. It wouldn't have been worth putting your money on it, because I mean, the temperature had gone 5 or 6 degrees one way, or the humidity had changed. You just couldn't say. But we thought we had the very best chance, and particularly after the Formula One race, where in spite of the handling of the bike, it had made good times, he'd had a good race. He was feeling confident, which was probably the most important part of tuning a bike up.
But yeah, the CDTT came, obviously, and the fastest two guys around there, myself and Steve, hadn't won a race, which is bizarre, really. So it was, something was going to happen, wasn't it?
Yes, it was beautiful. Well, I say beautiful, it was hot, and hot we didn't really want. Following the F1 race and the overheating problem, I put some wicker strips on the fairings to try and create more drag through the radiators and bring the temperatures down. But again, because of the frailty of the engine, we really would have preferred it to be about 10 degrees cooler. Exhaust temperatures on that Norton were about 1100 degrees centigrade. Now the average four-stroke is 800, 850. If it had been a night race, you could see the exhaust pipes burning, and that was really our main worry, had we got the fueling right. And it was a balance between running it too rich and running out of fuel, or too lean and seizing up.
I think we all thought that that bike wouldn't last the distance at the time. There was lots of hype because this was Steve Hislop, and he'd won on the RVF the year before. You have to remember that in '91, the RVFs with Foggy and Hislop on board were in my opinion, they were the finest bikes ever to go around a TT course. Nothing has been so special, so trick, so exotic since or before. And I'm sort of including the Honda 6 in all that.
Everything was perfect. You know, the cloud, the skies were clear. You know, the crowds were there. The heat was up. You know, this was the perfect setting for what I thought was going to be the race of my life.
It's the senior TT race of 1992, and the Isle of Man is about to witness motorcycle racing history.
Steve Hislop, second in every race bar one, has one last chance today. And this is the race which could put his name and Norton's into the history books.
Two great riders, two different riders. You know, Foggy was a nut job. You know, determination and you know, that's what he was full of. You know, Steve was more meticulous and knew what he wanted and had that ultimate natural ability. You know, where Foggy sort of pushed it to happen. You know.
You know, we've done everything we can, but we do know that on a course of 37.5 miles, there are an awful lot of things that can happen which are completely outside our control, which is the same for everybody, but it plays on your mind. As anybody who's been in charge of a big team with responsibility going to the Isle of Man will know, it starts churning your stomach about the beginning of April.
Flag poised, ready. At 10-second intervals they go. Joey Dunlop, number 3.
Joey's one of my heroes, but then Joey Dunlop in the late 70s, early in 80s was unbelievable. You can't get near the guy who's the best. You know, he's king of the mountain still, in my opinion. For he might have wins it out, but I'm saying at this point now in my career, how fast I was, and you know, and Steve Hislop sort of thing. It's, you know, once '89 arrived, me, him, maybe Brian Morrison, Dave Leach, we were the new kind of fast guys at the TT. Joey was, I don't know how old Joey was, but you know, I've got nothing but respect for him. But I knew that he wouldn't trouble me at all in the race. I've got to be honest about that. In 1992, you know, he'd only come back from a serious injury, I think, in '89.
At number 4, Carl Fogarty, Yamaha's hot favourite. Behind him in the line, Steve Hislop waits his turn. 1 minute and 10 seconds past 10. Big Jeffries and the Honda leave the line.
I finished 4th in every race. Can you imagine how sickening that was? Having been on the rostrum most years from about 87. And then in the 92 year, I was 4th in the Formula 1, 4th in the 400 race, 4th in the 600 race. So I really thought I would be in with a chance of being on the rostrum. Winning, you know, you're competing against Carl Fogarty and Steve Hislop. They were the finest TT riders around at the time. Philip McCallum was up and coming. Joey was still around, and of course Robert Dunlop on the other Norton. So there were some terrific riders.
Even Philip McCallum was a good rider, good, hard, strong rider, but you know, he's maybe some would say a bit mad, but he wasn't scared of anything, Philip. But again, because his short circuit kind of ability wasn't good at all. So a lot of that circuit, I could ride like a short circuit, certainly a mountain section. And you know, maybe Philip could hang on to me a little bit right up to like Ramsey, but I pulled 10 seconds on him over the mountain, you know.
Foggy is different. we had a good relationship as well with Foggy. We still have banter today when we meet up about it. You know, Foggy was more arrogant. You know, Foggy would tell you what he's going to do. You know, Hizzy and I would sort of just win and say nothing, but Foggy would go to win and he would tell you, you know, and he was a determined, aggressive rider, hence he's, you know, multi-world champion. And but no, another great guy. You know, I believe when I needed help before, Foggy helped me, and didn't like it when you beat him. You know, the Northwest and TT was one of those places, but no, I've nothing bad to say about Foggy either.
At the start line, the moment has come for Steve Hislop. And after just 10 miles, Fogarty's already ahead of Joey Dunlop, who was up until 3 a.m. sorting out last-minute problems on the Honda.
You know, from about halfway around the first lap, we thought, well, you know, things seem to be going well for us, touch wood. Subsequently, we found out that the bike was feeling a lot better as far as Steve was concerned. The temperature was down, and he realised that, you know, he could use the full power of the bike. He got more used to it because of the 6 laps he'd done in the first Superbike race, plus the practice.
Coming off Cronky-Voddy, McCallan's already being pressed hard by the flying Norton of Robert Dunlop, joint leader with Carl Fogarty. He's half a mile from Belough Bridge at Balacry.
You know, I remember starting off, and I remember, I don't even think it was far out the road, I seen the temperature gauge starting going up. And I thought, there's different sections of the course where, you know, you're maybe closed in, temperature gauge goes up a little bit, then when you get in the open space it drops down again, and this thing went up to 80, 85, 90, it went up to the full of the clock, and my heart sank. It was just, someone has taken my prize away.
I mean, Foggy was the one we were racing against. You know, McCallan was this Irishman who came over occasionally and did quite well, but Foggy was the one we wanted to beat.
Robbers at Balacry's in front of McCallan, but the Honda will not be dropped, and Gable gets the wobbles. Ian Locker behind takes over Steve Hazlitt's entry, and coming out of Ramsey onto the mountain, Carl Fogarty has a lead of 2 seconds over Steve Hislop.
So I was that confident then, because I was so far in front in the first Superbike race that I'm going to win this. If the bike keeps going, I'm going to win the race. That's me done, you know. So that was the way I felt, and so the first signal board came out, I think P1 plus 1, then it went to P1 plus nothing. Oh, what the hell's this? And P1 plus 1 again. I led at the end of the first lap, and then I hadn't pulled my usual 10 seconds over the mountain on the road, what we call the road circuit guys, like, you know, Joey and Robert and Philip McCallan. And I thought, it's got to be Hislop, this, you know, the only you can run around here as fast as me. I mean, my bike was working good, it really was. It wasn't the fastest thing in the world, far from it. You know, the Norton was a missile, but he's got, you know, the fastest bike, or one of the fastest riders, in my opinion, ever around the TT, one of the best ever. It's going to be hard to beat, and I just thought, it's got to be him. I'm in for that later on and now, so. It crossed my mind it could be Philip McCallan a little bit early on, because I mean, no disrespect to Philip, he's a good rider, but he wasn't in the same class as me and Steve on the TT or any circuit, to be fair. It must have been the end of the second lap, because I would have been told in the pit stop, it's Steve. I thought, oh God, on the Norton, then I've got to have a problem here, because this thing accelerates and top speed's like 15, I think it was over 50 miles faster than mine through a speed trap, you know. So when you've got them sort of stats you're up against, again, with a talent like he is round there, he was unbelievable round there. He was pinpoint accurate round there with Steve. He really was. Then I thought, I'm in for a hell of a battle here now.
And up over Aggo's Leap. We have to wait 2 minutes for Steve Hislop to come through the start line before we know a time. Fogarty will be 5 miles into the course before he knows how he's doing, so he must press on. Robert Dunlop leads Phil McCallan through Bray Hill, and he may be second or third depending on Hislop's lap time. Foggy's leaving Braddon for Union Mills, and here is the Norton, second place, 1 second down, flying out of Bray Hill.
I would say the excitement was building, because it was obviously close, or fairly close, right from the start.
Fogarty's at Quarry Bends, hanging on to a tiny lead, perhaps. At Magarrow, Steve Hislop knows what Fogarty doesn't. The gap between them is just 1 second.
I think I was at Rencullen on the way you can't sit anymore, where you come over the top of it. The second bit though, I don't know what they call it, is it Birkin? No. Yeah, there's a first jump and it goes right then left and over that one there. Me and the missus had the legs over the bank in there and watched it there. And yeah, it was a proper ding-dong battle, wasn't it?
By Ramsey, Hislop has edged into the lead. Fogarty knows it now as he comes out onto the fastest part of the course.
I really don't think it struggled anywhere in the senior race. It excelled on the mountain, the speed, obviously, because it was immensely quick. You know, it was doing 200 miles an hour at the northwest long before anybody else got near that. Acceleration from the slower corners, of which there aren't that many, was obviously not as good as the modern-day four-strokes, but hence the difference in the lap speed. But I think Steve said it was a nice bike to ride in the end.
Robert Dunlop's in front on the road, third on corrected time, but Fogarty's already going downhill. At the bungalow, though, Steve Hislop on the White Norton is race leader, still climbing up Halewood's rise. Fogarty into the pits for fuel and perhaps a rear tyre. His lap time and time in the pits are measured from when he sets his foot down in the box.
He stayed like +1 around that. I think I led at the end of the second lap as well, if I remember rightly. I wasn't really aware of any problems knowing Hado didn't have, to be fair. I really didn't. All I knew it was this thing is the fastest thing in the world, and if he rides it right, then I'm going to, you know, even me, the way I ride and the way I was riding, I'm going to struggle to beat him, you know.
And Fogarty exits, 27 seconds in the pits, a fast turnaround, fuel and a quick wipe at the visor. The rear tyre is OK. Robert Dunlop comes into the pits, no sign of overheating for the Norton on this hot day, but still that question mark is there. But Fogarty's back on with the programme while the pit stops continue.
We knew we had a good pit crew, and everything was right with the equipment as much as we could get it there. The first pit stop came up and everything seemed to go quite well. Because of the heat, you've got to be very careful what you're actually doing, spilling fuel, that sort of thing. The power has quite an effect on the tyres. You know, we're concerned that obviously that we hadn't done before this first Superbike race, we hadn't actually, I don't think we'd completed 6 laps at any sort of sensible speed. So again, there were quite a lot of unknowns. You've got to check the chain, which again is red hot. Fueling, that's fairly simple. Tyre changes, again, that's fairly simple.
The pits, and with a tiny 2-second lead, the Norton team changed the back tyre. In a stop lasting 33 seconds, the lead was lost and Steve Hislop went down into second place. Fogarty's already at Bargarrow, 12 miles up the road, and in the pits, Joey Dunlop retires, all chances of a record win gone. Phil McCallan definitely out now.
I believe I came into the pits, we checked, I told the boys what was wrong. We were hoping sometimes that, you know, if there's plenty of wind and there's little water there, we can get enough to keep going, but there wasn't. You know, this bike just, temperature gauge went off the clock and it's pulled in.
And only Carl Fogarty stands between the Norton riders and their slot in the record books.
That was another couple of boxes ticked because McCallan, as I think I said to you, was one of our rated riders. Joey, not so much at that time. The other thing, of course, was I knew pretty well what they were riding and how they were going to perform, whereas they didn't know how ours were going to perform, which helped. That sort of thing helps to sort of settle the nerves a bit.
And it's a lap record which a year ago never looked like being approached again unless the RVFs returned. But we've already been within a couple of seconds of it, and we haven't seen a full flying lap yet. This could be the fastest lap on record if the Norton doesn't seize and if the Yamaha gearbox holds up.
The year is 1992 and the senior TT race between Steve Hislop and Carl Fogarty has reached fever pitch.
Fogarty's away and over the mountain, pushing hard because he knows that the White Norton is reeling him in again, and the lead from the pit stops had halved by the time he reached Ramsey, and that the Norton will fly across the mountain.
The bungalow, I remember now, the bungalow, the second gear was a little bit low there. He was revving a bit going in, so I think maybe in the senior, I went to third gear with a bit coming out sort of thing, you know, but I just wanted to save the gearbox.
Fogarty, Hislop, Dunlop and Jeffries, that's the order, first to fourth as the leaders come streaming over the mountain on their third lap. Robert Dunlop, third on the timesheets, ahead on the road, but the White Norton closing from behind. Fogarty at the crag, into circuit racing mode, scratching, very fast across the mountain. The battle almost halfway over, but this one isn't as easy as the Formula One, and there's no sign here of that massive 40-second lead, and here's the reason why.
The bike was fast. It was really, really fast to know. And I mean, I'll take away from Steve. You still got to ride the thing, you know. But you know, I mean, I was fast over the mountain. I really was. I've had battles with Steve on the Super Sport 400s. I beat him in the 750 production race in 1989. And he knew I was fast over the mountain. Me, a short circuit. He was faster than me, I think, from the start to finish down towards Baloff. I would give him that advantage. From Baloff to Ramsey, maybe me, I don't know, very even. Over the mountain, I would pull on him, no question. But for him to pull on me, the bike was incredibly fast. I mean, there's no way he went through by trap 190. I think I went through 168 or something. It was crazy, to be honest. It really was.
The start of lap 4 as they pass the halfway mark, and Fogarty knows that Norton is close behind, despite the much faster Yamaha pit stop. Still coming down off the mountain, Steve Hislop, and because he's a couple of minutes behind on the road, nobody really knows how close it is. Following Nick Jeffries out of Brayhill, Robert Dunlop is third, 30 seconds behind the battle for the lead.
And Robert again was good on the little 125 super. He's not, you know, you can't. He's fantastic ride on them little bikes. On the big bikes, no, nowhere near as sort of level me and Steve were on that kind of circuit, or any circuit to be fair, you know, to be honest.
Fogarty is squirting past them, still flying on this lap, trying to maintain a lead. Here he is at Ramsey hairpin, and the signboards now tell him that he is chasing the White Norton. Across the mountain, Fogarty gets his head down and starts to chase hard. In the pits at the end of lap 4, Steve Hislop has opened up an 8-second gap on Carl Fogarty.
I remember coming to the pits, Phil from Dunlop, and he said, the tyre's fine, it's fine, don't change it. So I think I pulled some time back there with Steve, because Steve, obviously with the Norton, we've been so fast, he was using more fuel, so I think his tank, maybe with a double size amount, so he took longer to fill up. His pit stop was definitely longer than mine, I know they were, so I pulled some time back there. So that, again, that gave me that second win.
No rear tyre, Fogarty gets away after another perfect 27-second pit stop.
When we came in for the second stop, we looked at the tyre at the end of the first stop, which we changed. We looked at the tyre and thought, well, that's pretty good. It would have done 4 laps. And I've an idea that when it stopped, we looked at it quickly and we couldn't see anything wrong with it, so we decided to leave it. Michelin guy said we ought to change it. And I said to him, if we lose this race because we've changed that tyre and we don't need to, I'll kill you. One of the lads had trouble getting the petrol cap in, and I think you can hear me on the film shouting, "Don't panic, Mr. Mannering," or something like that. And of course, luckily the cap went straight in and he was off.
Don't panic, slow down, that's it. That's Barry. Off we go.
By Balacrane, 7 miles into the course, Fogarty had gained a 3-second lead. The pendulum was swinging back in Yamaha's direction once again.
I'll be honest with you, I got a little bit tired. I pushed really hard in the first couple of laps. I couldn't break him, couldn't get away. +1, plus nothing. And then I think the 4th or 5th lap, I think it was maybe the 4th, yeah, 3rd or 4th lap, I just struggled. I thought, oh, I've gone here, I'm probably struggling here, you know. And I kind of got a second win and pushed hard the 5th and 6th laps, you know.
And behind comes the White Norton, quivering under brakes for the right-hander at Balacrane, charging hard to catch up with Carl Fogarty once again.
About 3/4 of the way through the 5th lap, when things were going which way and the other, Yamahas tend to, when they get hot, as with the Hondas, they tend to slow up slightly. When the Norton gets hot, it stops. But it doesn't slow down until that point. So I felt that as we'd got that far, that things should be good with the machine. And so that's when as I say, I changed from race team to fan and started listening to the commentary and getting excited, as did everybody else.
Coming into Ramsey, 17 miles up the road, Fogarty doesn't yet know what Hislop has done between the hedges and the stone walls, through Handleys, Kirkmichael, Wren, Cullen and Belough. fast through quarry bends, touching 185 miles an hour in places, faster than a Grand Prix bike. And he relentlessly closes that gap between Glen Helen and Ramsey. In just 14 miles, Steve Hislop has pulled up 7 seconds, passing Fogarty for the lead and closing with Robert Dunlop and Nick Jeffries on the road.
You know, by that time the gaps had started to shorten and they were switching. Everything was done and it was down to the two riders, the two machines. And it was obviously going to be very, very close, and nobody would be able to tell really until the last trip down Crutchley Road what the result was going to be. We had a sneaking suspicion, but with the past record of those bikes, you know, nobody was certain until they crossed the line.
Across Snaefell, Fogarty once again struggled with bike trouble. The exhaust was blowing and the Yamaha was going flat on him. He was losing that vital performance edge in a race that was heading towards record-breaking speeds. He just wasn't quite as fast as he had been on the opening laps.
The clock had bounced out once. I remember putting it back in. None of the clocks were working. The screen had broke. I can't remember what laps this. I just remember the exhaust going on the last lap. But there's fluid everywhere, bits of fluid everywhere. I think it was brake light fluid, or the forks have seemed bomb. Everything, I didn't know what was going wrong. I just knew there was no clocks working, and there's bits of fluid everywhere, you know. I knew, I must have thought it's not oil, because I'd smell it and I'd probably be off now, you know. It was coming from like the brake reservoir at the top, you know. There's a bit of fork seal oil around top of forks. I remember seeing that. And during the race, I wasn't really worried of dropping to pieces. I just worried that the clocks weren't working, there were bits of spray of oil everywhere, the screen was broke. That's all I was aware of. That wasn't really a big issue. And the exhaust blow on the last lap, that wasn't not really a big issue, was it really, you know?
Steve Hislop on the Norton, slightly slower than he had been as well, but quicker than the Yamaha, charging again over Snaefell.
It's the senior TT race of 1992, and the battle for the lead couldn't be any closer.
As Fogarty roars through Bray Hill, Steve Hislop is just coming down from the mountain, but the indications are that he leads this race by 4 or 5 seconds from Carl Fogarty. 6.4. That was the gap at the start line as Hislop hammers Bray Hill on the final lap.
It was the last lap decider with changes, which doesn't happen often, because by then normally somebody has got the situation under control, has got a lead that is big enough for him to manage on the racetrack. Not then, not that time.
Fogarty too, giving it everything on this last high-speed lap. And going into Ramsey, Carl Fogarty on a very fast lap, the Yamaha man breaking records measured point to point, but the vital time is grandstand to grandstand. Fogarty out of Ramsey, coming in the other side. The white Norton is charging. He's not breaking records too. And over the mountain, Carl Fogarty is fast again, even with a bike that's gone off song.
You know, I got the last pit board minus 9 seconds. I thought, I can't pull this back now. I pushed hard off at mountain. Again, on a bike that wouldn't have been as fast as over the mountain. I must have been going quick, so I pulled 5 seconds back.
And there's the board that tells him he has to try harder, must ride faster if he can.
I enjoyed that. I used to love that, mate. You couldn't wait to get to the next board to see where you were, you know. I remember the first board popped out. I don't even I can't remember who it was now. It was something to do with the Yamaha team I was with. I can't remember who was signalling, but he kind of bottomed down to fast sort of double left before you go down to Kirkmichael. There was a board just popped out of the bushes there. P1+1, like, oh, nearly at the bloody board, you know. So it's a strange place to signal me, but I always remember it popping out this bush there, you know. But because your eyes are looking at it anyway as you're coming out this sort of right, fast double left-hander, sorry, yeah.
Steve sorted his own boards. We provided an extra one at Governor's Dip just to tell him when he was to stop for fuel, just in case. It's something I've always done, in fact, with all the riders.
Crossed his mind a few times now, thinking, hang on a minute, I'm not sure I drew a board there, so this might be Steve Hislop fan, or Joey fan was trying to slow me down or something, I don't know. But I knew my dad would be at the gooseneck. He was right in the gooseneck, and my dad was unbelievable. He's standing out far Arctic Road that I had to swerve to miss him, sort of thing, you know. But it's good to get them boards. You're looking forward to getting that board. It feels really good when it says, when it's gone up +5 or something, +10. And it's like gone down to minus. I'm like, oh, gutted, you know, but it didn't happen very often, the minuses. I did get tired, I think, during the race a little bit. I think about 4th, 5th lap. Then I pushed really hard on 6th lap, just maybe trying to make the Norton break or something, you know. They had to go with me. And I pulled the... I mean, my bike was falling apart as well, like you wouldn't believe. There were no clocks working, there were bits of spray of oil everywhere, the screen was broke, there's all sorts wrong with it. On the last lap, the exhaust blew, I think. I remember it making a right noise coming to Parliament Square. I thought, like, this thing's unbelievable. And I remember thinking, I couldn't wait to get off the bike, because I'm accelerating and up towards, like, the gooseneck. It's like making a right noise. I thought, oh, God, the faster I go on this thing, the quicker I can get off it, you know. She's probably not the wisest thing to be thinking on the most dangerous circuit in the world when this thing's falling apart around me, you know, it really was. But it did feel good to ride. It felt mint to ride. Suspension had gone, but it was like, I could feel what it was doing. I think there's a few shots of me maybe coming out of bedstead and whatnot, and things all over the place. But I knew what I was doing. It felt really good, even though nothing was working on it, you know. Everything was broke on it.
And he is trying hard. Bedstead coming out of signpost, a mile to go, and Fogarty absolutely on the limit. Steve Hislop's ahead on time, behind on the road. Fogarty will have to wait 3 minutes at the finish before he knows whether he has won or lost.
All we could do was listen to the countdown. I had confidence that Steve was going to make it, because I knew that the gap he'd had at the previous time check was had a little bit in hand, and he wasn't going a lot slower than Foggy. But you know, you're never certain till the flag drops.
The bike was, I don't know, it kept going. He did the 6 laps and kept going. He wouldn't have done another lap, no question. But, you know, would Steve's done another lap? I don't know.
The checkered flag for Carl Fogarty, and he smashes the lap record by 3 seconds. But is he the winner?
He's had a hell of a weight. I'm number 4, he's number 19.
Looking up the road, looking for the helmets, and sort of when he should have come, seeing a helmet coming, and was it him? Is it the pink elephant?
Or is it Hislop? The white Norton charges out of signpost, and Bedstead still going flat out.
It's definitely the longest 2 minutes I've ever spent, and I suspect there were 6 other guys in the pit lane besides me that were feeling exactly the same. And sort of the relief when you see, well, he is there, and the countdown is going on in the background, because you can still hear it above all, and the yelling from behind us in the pits. You know, people were screaming.
And it's counting now, it's 10, 9, 8, and I looked, I'm thinking, am I?
Steve Hislop, and it's history! A win for Hislop and a win for Norton.
Here he is off. You know?
When he did come, and as I say, the countdown, and he crossed the line, that was it.
I was pushing hard, and it was a great race. It really was, to be part of history. And you know, now I look back on it, and yeah, he beat me. I'd have been fine with that, to be honest. I still was fine with it, because we had this thing about being the fastest guy. I always wanted to be the fastest guy in the TT. I wanted the lap record, you know. It goes back to even in 1990 when I beat him in both races. He'd come in and change the brakes or something, went back out again and brought that record again, just shadow my day a little bit, you know. He was like that, me and Steve, we were battling around there. I'm thinking to myself, I might have lap record, you know. And it wasn't until we're on the roster, and they said, but the new outright lap record has gone to Carl Fogarty, and Steve's face dropped, you know. I was like, yes, get in there, as good as he was. But we both went happy, home happy, I guess. It was all good, really. I think we both, you know, deserved a few beers that night, and both kind of happy with how it ended, really. My only thing that made me slightly upset about the whole thing was if I just won that first Superbike race, you know, having led it by miles, 30, 40 seconds in front with a lap to go, that was the only thing that just took the shine off it for me, because that was, you know, a race win for TT I'd have had. And finishing second behind Steve in the senior TTs, you know, he's pretty special anyway, because he was so good round there and set the lap record with it, and I would have been very, very happy. Instead, I was just very happy.
One of the truly great TTs. And it's quite difficult to put into words now, these years on, 20-odd years on, just what a jaw-dropping shock it was for that motorcycle to win in the Isle of Man. Obviously nobody, Steve Hislop won, yes of course, but to win on that motorcycle, which physically must have been hellish to ride. It must have been hard work, to put it mildly, to drag that thing.
It was so fragile, the thing, and when you put it all together with a new chassis, a new team, those sort of things really don't happen. But in that case, it did. And there were about, I don't know, 100,000 people around the track who were very pleased it did.
I mean, after when we looked at the bike after, and like I said, some of the sprocket bolts had sheared off, and the rear brake arm was completely bent up. I don't know how that happened. It wasn't me. I don't know, it's just that part. But there was all sorts bent on it. I think 2 of the sprocket bolts had sheared off after. You shut the bike after a few bits fell off it as well. It really was. I wish somebody had just left that bike as it was now and then stuck it in a museum, but that bike was used the week after, stripped down and used for Rob Mack for British Shoe Bikes or something, it's a shame really, but yeah, it was a great bike to ride. We had trouble in the practice week trying to get it right, but got it right for the race. Lovely to ride. It wasn't the fastest thing in the world. It wasn't in the top 8 through the speed trap at all at any point, I don't think, for all the speed trap times, but it was really good to ride. I could ride it really hard, as you saw, but when you're giving so much speed advantage away to somebody as talented as Steve is, on a bike as fast as that, then it was always going to be very difficult to win the race, really.
From the point of view of my staff, I was so thrilled for them because, as I say, they had worked so hard and very trying circumstances. As you know, Norton's finances were in difficulties, and there were times when mechanics weren't paid. Chris Mayhew, Chris Pike, Ray Corbett, Dave Evans back at the workshop all deserve far more than they ever got from the race win. When we got back to Shenstone, the boys on the factory floor were thrilled to bits. We got a round of applause. The only question I got from the managing director then was the fact that the pit looked a bit untidy at the second pit stop because there were bits of paper everywhere. And that really summed up the management's attitude to the whole thing, that they just...
You're thrown lots of things at you, thrown at you and your machine and the whole thing during that week, 2 weeks, the Isle of Man, it's hard work, but to come away from there and come away with a lap record, which stood for 7 years, which is something, I'm very proud of. Not many people can say they're going to break the Isle of Man TT lap record in the same year they win a World Superbike Championship race. It doesn't happen anymore, it never happened again, It wasn't probably until years later, really, that people said that's the best race of all time. I remember Agostini Hillwood and others, and I thought, oh, it's nice that it's mentioned, that people think it's that good it can be in the top 5 or top 10 or whatever. We'll get goosebumps talking about it now, yeah, I'm proud of that. Steve was a brilliant rider around there, and I was pretty good, so we pushed really hard. I love the place, still do. I'll never have a bad word said against it, that's how much it means to me as a human being, as a person who's kind of lived and been brought up around it since I was a kid.
He knew it would be good if he could win the TT on a British bike, but he said to me several times after that he didn't realise just what it would mean. Forevermore he's known as the man who won the TT on a British bike the first time for 35 years.